Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started soon. Try to get started on time. And welcome to PCOS Wednesdays. This is part of our ongoing series of PCOS Explained. If you head over to our IGTV section on our Instagram, you'll see us really every week we add a new episode. So I'm going to turn this music off and welcome everyone who came in at 8 o'clock. My name is Dr. Siobhan Joseph, and I am a board-certified, U.S. board-certified gynecologist, and I'm really focusing a lot more on hormonal imbalances that are impacting most of us women. And tonight's topic is actually going to be based on vitamin D. And I tried my best to really condense it down because it is a pretty involved vitamin/hormone, as you will see. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is why do I even need vitamin D and how do I get it? So the first thing we know is that vitamin D really just plays a big role in helping your body to absorb your calcium and phosphorus, which are minerals that you need for your bones. And also it plays a role in your immune system as well too. And then how do you get vitamin D? So vitamin D can be, it's a nutrient that we can either eat it or produce it within our body. So it's very unique in that aspect because you can ingest it in your nutrition and also you produce it on your own. It is fat soluble, which means that it really depends a lot on your body fat balance as well too, which is something a lot of women don't realize where this hormone is concerned. In terms of the role, a lot is still coming out. Part of why I put this on today is more recent studies have been released as of 2021 March concerning a direct link with polycystic ovarian syndrome and your vitamin D levels. But within the cancer research, you cannot see any research being done in cancer within cancer arena without discussing vitamin D. And also reduces infections and helps how your body works with infections and also inflammation in the body as well. So it plays a role in many parts in your body, including calcium and bone modeling and shaping. So because of that impact, a lot of our modern day nutrition is actually fortified with vitamin D. So if you use dairy products, most dairy products will actually be labeled stating that they're fortified with vitamin D. Hi, good night, everyone. Thanks for coming in. And just by doing that in the agriculture world, they were able to reduce the worldwide incidence of vitamin D deficiencies, the severe forms. But I'm speaking to the average person who may just have an underlying touch of vitamin D deficiency because that's still problematic as well, too. So it's still a very common problem, and then as we age, we also make less of it naturally as a hormone as well too. So it's something to keep in the forefront. Where fortified products are concerned, yes, they add vitamin D to cow's milk, that's one example, but it really would require drinking 2 cups of cow's milk daily just to absorb somewhere around 200 international units of vitamin D. So I'm not sure how many of us are drinking 2 cups of just pure milk, cow's milk daily. So therein lies part of the issue where your vitamin D is concerned. But I said you can get it 3 ways: through your skin, through your nutrition, and then you also most times would need to take supplements to really reach your target where your vitamin D levels are concerned. As we age, the requirement differs. So for instance, a newborn, young children, they really only require about 400 international units of vitamin D per day. Most of our adulthood, we require about 600. And then as we get older, and older men and women require usually on average about 800. But it also depends on any other medical issues that you may have, which I'm going to touch on as well. So people who have a deficiency will require more. So those numbers I just called out, basically anyone from teenage years through about age 70 requires about 600 IUs of vitamin D daily. So when you look at your supplements, you might see most of them may have 500. It depends on what it's combined with, but anywhere between 500 and 600 is what we've established. So A deficiency in anything is basically you don't have enough to remain healthy. So vitamin D deficiency, basically you don't have enough, or you don't produce enough, you don't absorb enough through your intestines, and you are deficient, and it's you're not able to stay healthy as a result of that. In the UK, the NHS did do a few studies in the UK, and they saw that the average person, just based on getting their nutritional fortified foods, just like I said, 2 cups of cow's milk in a day is something most of us, I wish I could poll everyone in this room, but it's something that most of us do not drink on a daily basis, 2 cups of milk. So they found that the average person was barely getting about 300, about half the amount of vitamin D nutritionally. So you become deficient if you're not absorbing it, if you're not getting it enough in your diet. You become deficient if you don't get enough exposure to sunlight, which I'm going to touch on very specifically. You become deficient if either your liver or kidney, which are unique functions in both your liver and your kidney, they take the vitamin D that you've either eaten or produced in your skin, and they convert it into a more readily available form. And that process could be impaired if you suffer with liver or kidney disease. And then there are some medications that reduce absorption of it as well. So as you go down the list, one person could have checked 3 of those items and end up with a severe deficiency. The people who are at risk, I'm at risk. I don't do dairy. So anyone who's lactose intolerant, doesn't do milk, doesn't eat eggs, fish also should have some vitamin D availability because animals produce it as well. So someone who's on a vegan diet really would be more at risk, a higher risk anyway of deficiency. People with inflammatory bowel diseases, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, and those, they will not absorb it in their food as much. People with obesity is important because it does bind in fat cells. So if you are considered obese, your vitamin D actually gets sort of accumulated in the fatty areas of our body, and it's not very accessible for regular daily use. So you end up having deficiency as well too. And then they also know when someone starts losing weight or dropping their body fat percentage, their vitamin D levels go up. So, women who've had bowel surgery or weight loss surgery as well are more at risk as well too. In terms of children, the most deficiencies around the breastfeeding time. A lot of kids' supplements will carry vitamin D in it as well too. There are I could go on, other risk factors. Definitely your medical doctor would identify if you have underlying kidney, parathyroid, thyroid disease, things that impact your calcium. They would need to check on your vitamin D as well too. But you are at risk of other hidden risks, people who take laxatives often. And I could do another session on laxatives and the reasons why we really shouldn't. A lot of us were raised on laxatives, but they definitely do impair absorption and vitamin D deficiencies. With frequent laxative use is a key factor as well. Anyone on cholesterol medication, obviously affecting how fat is absorbed, and a few other medications, including people who are on like seizure meds and HIV meds, their vitamin Ds will be impacted. Particular to polycystic ovarian syndrome, this was a new crop of studies that came out in 2021, and I just have to share that it is something I think now I have to go back in time and just check more people for vitamin D. I'm trying to be thorough most times, but it really has come out that it does play quite an integral role in how our eggs are maturing in the ovary and impacting fertility. Those are the baby eggs that accumulate when someone has polycystic ovarian syndrome and they're not ovulating as they should. Those eggs produce high levels of a hormone called AMH. And vitamin D has a reversal on that effect and make those baby eggs more functional. So it's something that just more recently came out, and I think a lot of things with PCOS are going to start and continue, not just start, but continue rolling out over time. And this was a big one that did sort of, rock me a bit, that, okay, I have not really been as conscientious about checking everyone's vitamin D levels, but definitely they're not suggesting that, but it's just based on what other risk factors or symptoms someone may have. We should check that. because it is found to have a anti-inflammatory impact on women with PCOS. It improves their immunity, and it helps also in women who are trying to conceive. So now they're talking about metformin plus vitamin D, inositol plus vitamin D, adding that in there in terms of women who are trying to better manage ovulation specifically. So where polycystic ovarian syndrome is concerned, there's a bunch of things that could be wrong, but we're looking at studies where vitamin D improves how the egg on the egg level, which is actually a big deal, really recruiting those immature eggs and improving the way that they function, and they're more responsive to ovulation. A lot more studies are needed, of course, which we'll be rolling out. But based on everything else that vitamin D does, why not just improve that situation either way? So I think it's win-win if you're on your adequate supplements. So having a deficiency, I talked about it affecting your bones and your bone density. And this is really with prolonged vitamin D deficiency. Back in the day, really, if you think about pirates and rickets and bone disease, actually no, pirates get scurvy, but rickets, it's something that we would say is back in the days, but it has had a resurgence in a lot of communities worldwide. And this is why the World Health Organization and large international organizations are really focusing on the fact that young children are getting rickets again, and that's where the bones are very soft and they don't harden, so the bones remain too soft and they become very deformed. It was considered rare, but now in a lot of, not just like southern India, where malnutrition is prevalent, in certain war-torn areas, but they looked at studies of urban centers in the US, and African American children were really having bone development issues related to vitamin D deficiency. So it's actually an urban disease that's impacting young children. In adults, the severity of the deficiency leads to soft bones as well, which is called osteomalacia. Very hard to diagnose. I mean, the main symptoms are my bones hurt and my muscles feel weak. So checking a vitamin D is important, especially if you have chronic, body aches, bone pain, weak bones. Any adult who's had a fracture, you fracture your ankle and you're in your mid-30s, that's something to really look at as a red flag that you may be suffering with a vitamin D deficiency, where your bones are actually not functioning as they should. And then calcium, anyone with the most severe or most serious complication of having a vitamin D deficiency is hypocalcemia, where your calcium levels are too low. And that's hospital, ICU, that's every system just starts to malfunction because of low calcium coupled with low vitamin D. So these are less common complications, and it's unlikely you're going to have those because at some point something you've eaten or something is going to be fortified. And again, I talked about eggs and so forth. You'll get your vitamin D, but this is very prolonged deficiency. Those happens. More so, it's important to understand that most of the body's organs and tissues actually have receptors for vitamin D. So they used to think it was just the bone, and now they realize that from brain to skin, there are receptors where vitamin D plays an important role, and now they're talking about the ovaries as well too. So the spectrum of activity that vitamin D is involved in really now has to be looked at as almost how you look at your thyroid. It's a very core functionality that it provides as a vitamin. So it is something to keep on the radar when you have generalized symptoms that you can place. Anyone with heart disease, high blood pressure, autoimmune disease, anyone, as I said, fractures of bone as an adult, cancer, breast cancer, MS, because of the nervous system, the list goes on. Now, the lack of vitamin D is usually not obvious in adults, right? Rickets and all these things. So the signs and symptoms, I wish I could say show of hands who doesn't feel this, but the signs and symptoms really are related to fatigue, bone pain, muscle weakness, muscle pain, depression. Depression is a big one as well too, and your moods are very unstable. Now, fatigue, bone pain, muscle pain, mood swings, and depression really checks a lot of boxes for a lot of other conditions. So having a vitamin E deficiency, most people have what we call an insufficiency, where they don't make enough, but they're kind of flying under the radar of having a deficiency, and their symptoms are what we would call subclinical, meaning that they really don't have very obvious signs and symptoms, but they're suffering still, and their quality of life is being impacted. So in order to do so, then you need to get tested and screened. There's no set guidelines as to when to screen. Obviously, symptoms is what we usually look at first. So the symptoms really would lead guide your doctor to order a test called your 25 hydroxy vitamin D level. And usually just that one blood test will kind of guide when next you need it, and looking at what issues and what supplements are needed as well too. So it's not routine, again, not as routine as checking the thyroid. Maybe one day it's going to get to that point. I'm personally going to try to roll it in more, but when you have these vague symptoms, fatigue and muscle aches and so forth, it is something that we have to keep on the table as screening vitamin D levels as well. And again, anyone who breaks a bone is an adult. So how do you get more? Right? How do I get more vitamin D? There are very few foods that actually naturally have it as a source, which is why deficiencies happen. Very few foods. So when you look at fish that are more fatty, they would tend to have more vitamin D. Like I said, animals produce it. We produce it as well too. So salmon, tuna, they always put mackerel on the list. But again, as a lactose intolerant individual, a vegan, a vegetarian, you really have to stay in front of your vitamin D needs, because you're not getting much from what you're doing in terms of avoiding animal products. So I'm in that corner as well. So they talk about fish, tuna, salmon, the fattier fish, mackerel, beef and liver, cheese. I'm trying not to make a face as I say but beef liver, cheese, and yay, for the vegans in the room, mushrooms carry a natural source of vitamin D. So you got to get those mushrooms in there. And egg yolks, not the egg whites, but the egg yolks. So even when you're trying to be healthy and you're doing egg whites, you're actually not getting any vitamin D unless you're doing the yolks. So that is why it kind of minimizes access via our foods. They started fortifying things with vitamin D, but cow's milk, right? And then you would have to drink at least 2 cups of cow's milk a day, which is what I said. Some breakfast cereals have it added in there, fortified. Tread lightly with those, because you got to ignore the vitamin D content and look at the sugar and all the other things that you don't want from them. Orange juices, again, there's sugars hidden in there, but they do fortify those products. I believe some soy milks as well, and of course yogurts, which falls under the category of dairy products that they would fortify with vitamin D. So the best way ends up being taking a daily supplement, really and truly. Most of us between our teenage years to about age 70, 500 to 600 units per day really is what's suggested. And most vitamin supplements will carry that in there. I always get the question as to which one is better. There's D2 and there's D3. They're both naturally occurring forms. The difference really is that plants produce D2 and animals produce D3. So our own vitamin E that we make is D3. So if you look at most of the studies, they suggest actually using D3 as your supplement because you're able to absorb it. I believe we have a question. Fruits and vegetables, do any of them have vitamin D? Absolutely. So that's exactly where I'm at right now. So D2 is found in fruits and vegetables, but it's still not in sufficient amounts. Mushrooms really is what they would compare to the content that's in eggs and in animal products. So mushrooms, for the most part, is always what bubbles up to the list in terms of veggies, but all fruits and vegetables, all life forms exposed to the sun make vitamin D. So you'll get it from them, but it's never enough. So definitely the best source is to be on a supplement. You produce it in your skin, which is a natural source of it. but most people have insufficient levels. And actually, women in the Caribbean are up there on the list, right alongside with 70-year-olds in northern London where there's no sunlight. So there's geographic influence on why you may have your deficiency, but there's also ethnic influence as well too. So the skin is the primary way that we make it naturally, because we really use the sun to roll that mechanism to produce the vitamin D. So if someone lives in places where the sunlight is limited, or there's winter time, 6-7 months of the year, or you live in a sunny area and you actually have limited sun exposure, and you're inside a lot, right? All of us are at risk right now, being inside a lot, that's an issue. People with darker skin tones tend to have lower blood levels as well too, because our pigment, melanin, acts like a shade. So our melanin reduces the production of the vitamin D in the level of where the skin is. Now, the melanin has a lot of other protective effects and roles where our skin is concerned, but it reduces how the sun impacts us, it reduces sun damage, but it also reduces how much vitamin D we actually make. So if you are in the Caribbean, what they found is we are darker complexion, so we actually one thing that the melanin is not doing for us, we're actually blocking how much sun we can absorb to produce vitamin D. And then on top of that, because it's hot and it's sunny, we actually run from the sun and we use an umbrella and we don't tan and so forth. So the deficiency is actually doubled at that point. So that's important to address as well too. So it's in water, vitamins. Most times you want to actually go straight to supplements for that. The amount of vitamin D that could be produced from actually being in the sun varies widely. So you'll hear me just keep repeating that you need to just take supplements as well. And then on top of that, if you apply sunscreen, so you go to the beach, you wear sunscreen, that blocks out another 90% of what the UVB rays are, which is the sun rays that actually work on the skin. So any particular supplement you would recommend? There are so many, I'll be honest. It's important with these vitamins to more so research the brand and all their products, make sure that they're trustworthy enough, because most are actually not put through any rigorous like FDA approval, but the brands and the people with a reputation at stake will probably give you the best option. But there are a lot, and vitamin D is rolled into a lot of women's daily supplements. What you want to look more for, so they say D3, so you want to look at the ones that have D3. D2 is a plant-based one, with D3 is the one that actually is processed more readily in our system. That's what they think. And then also the amount. So if you're between teenage years to menopause, you want to stick with anything around 500 to 600 international units of vitamin D. Now, back to the sunscreen. Sunscreen blocks it out about 90%. Also wearing full clothing that covers the skin, whether it's your preference, whether it's your style, whether it's religion, you will be acutely aware of needing to check your vitamin D levels if your sun exposure is even additionally limited as well. You're welcome. Now, spending times indoors, and then that's important to understand. So sometimes you're driving, you're in the sun, you're sitting in an office, you're like, well, I'm getting sun through this window. And absolutely, that's an incorrect way to think about it, because that sun that's coming in through your car's windshield, you're actually not absorbing UVB rays, which is what your body specifically needs. You have UVA, you have UVB, you have different types of UV, and windows, glass panes block that out. So even sitting behind a windshield and getting direct sun, that has no impact on your vitamin D whatsoever. So you actually have to be in direct sun. How much sun has not really been established, but we do know that there are skin cancers and skin changes due to excess sun exposure. So a few studies have agreed on the fact that you really only need about up to 20 minutes of direct sunlight 3 days out of the week. I don't know how they came up with that. So, if it's 20 minutes dedicated sun time, then you should be able to get it. But then that still goes to the fact that a lot of people are not going into sun for 20 minutes at a time. As you get older, your way your skin works changes, so the ability to make vitamin D as you get older in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and so forth, you don't make it no matter how much sun you go in, you don't make it the same way as you did when you were younger, so you still need your supplements. The darker the skin color I talked about, right? Melanin actually acts as a shade. And then living in northern climates, northern countries, and so forth, you're at risk as well too. Okay, we have a question. Oh, we're supposed to cover, yes, and avoid skin cancer. Exactly. 15 to 20 minutes is what the Skin Society has agreed with the vitamin D and the endocrinologist, 15 to 20 minutes of direct sunshine. But yes, within reason, and then obviously understand your risk factors for skin cancer as well too. The body does store vitamin D when you absorb it and produce it with the sun, but the rate of absorption and storage really is not guaranteed. So they say every week, at least 3 days is the requirement. But yes, because it can cause skin cancer, it's important to avoid excessive sun exposure. And tanning beds are not an option to correct your vitamin D needs. Absolutely not. And I think that's important to say as well too, that tanning beds and tanning facilities don't count. Now, can too much vitamin D be harmful? Yes. There's vitamin D toxicity. So you said, OMG, can we go in the sun? OMG, there's cancer risk. Same thing goes with the actual supplements I'm telling you about. Your same supplements are the most likely source of actually developing a vitamin D toxicity, where you have ingested more than you need, and you actually suffering consequences as well too. So rock or the hard place, but getting too much vitamin D, which is known as vitamin D toxicity, can be harmful. Signs of toxicity, don't shoot me, but it's very vague. Nausea, who doesn't get that sometimes? Vomiting, nausea, reduced appetite, constipation, weakness, and weight loss that's unwanted. So in general, when you're on multivitamins and supplements, definitely look to your bowels to give you signals, right? So if you're getting constipated, is it the iron in the vitamin, or is it that I'm overdoing it on my vitamin D? Calcium constipates as well. So as you really look into how your body rhythm works and you start understanding what your normal bowel function, changes in that is a great way to actually kind of gauge when you might be overdoing something. So if you're on a vitamin supplement and you're getting severe constipation, you want to back off of that and see if that was contributing or not, as well as other reasons for you to get evaluated. But one of them would be that excess vitamin D can damage the kidneys, but that's really in rare cases. Stacy says, beef doc, just eat more beef. We'll talk about that a little later. I don't know. I don't know how to respond about me eating more beef. To be frank, it's been since 1994. I checked on that. I thought about it, and I have not eaten meat since 1994. So I'll be taking my supplements. Thank you for the suggestion. But yeah, so back to vitamin D toxicity. Funny enough, excess sun exposure will not give you vitamin D toxicity. Yes, plant-based beef, which would be mostly soy, and a lot of soy products are fortified. So there's the answer. Thank you, Moneyvan Digital. I like that one. So the excess sun exposure, your body takes what it wants from nature. So you don't get toxicity from being in the sun. Your body kind of locks it off and says, I got enough, with no impact or negative impact. So it's usually you get this toxicity from overdoing it with the supplements. So again, the symptoms, nausea, actually increased thirst, increased urination because your kidneys are not working as they should, reduced appetite leading to weight loss, severe constipation, weakness. And also, as it gets more severe, you get a very foggy, confused brain. And there's something called ataxia. Everyone knows that episode of House. Well, I don't know if you're as geeky as me. I watch a lot of House. And he would try to find diagnoses, and he would always write vitamin D deficiency up on the board, or vitamin D toxicity, because the nervous system is truly directly impacted by vitamin D levels. There's one sign of toxicity, what's called ataxia, where you actually behave almost like you're drunk. You have a very slurred words and your legs, you're all stumbly. So I remember that episode from House where the guy was like arrested for drunk driving, but he actually had a vitamin D overdose that caused it. And that's really, I'm timing myself. I'm at 28 minutes now, and I just sort of ran through the vitamin D things, just the main key points to understand, especially for those who just joined. Thanks for giving me your time tonight. Vitamin D is both a vitamin, but it's actually more of a hormone. And I really want the take home to be tonight to start thinking about it as one of those core factors, just like your thyroid, which I touched on last week. Your vitamin D levels do impact pretty much every cell in your body carries a vitamin D receptor. The new breakout of studies where PCOS is concerned, they actually found the vitamin D receptors in the baby eggs and the ovary. And vitamin D levels started being really checked in women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and the deficiencies were there. It's a fat-soluble hormone, so it's stored in our fat. So if you do have accumulations of body fat, your vitamin D is sort of locked into place and you have deficiency, even though you have excess. It's weird, but that's another factor that they talk about as well, too. It causes, for the average person, not rickets, right? Unless you really have 4 nutritional deficiencies, but you may fracture an ankle as an adult from a vitamin D deficiency. Mood swings and depression, being unable to focus. I think everyone's checking off these things. And also every other type of disease you can think of is impacted by your vitamin D levels. So in general, the take home is when you go to your next routine checkup, if it hasn't been checked or you're not aware, or you have a lot of these other weird like muscle aches, I talked about joint pains, joint bone muscles, mood, those are all things that are impacted by your vitamin D levels. So if you're an adult, male or female, and I know we have some guys in here, you need a supplement because that's the real way that we get it. You get it from the sun, 15 to 20 minutes, 3 times a week is what they've estimated. But a lot of us run from sun, which is why actually deficiencies are quite high in the Caribbean. Darker skin tone, our melanin, which we love and works for us, also acts as a blind, like a shade, which blocks how much of that sun, the UVB light rays specifically that help us to produce our vitamin D. So if anyone has any questions or comments or tips, we are going to also release in the next couple of days, just sort of a shorter recap of the points I touched on if you missed anything. And male, female, child, elderly person, vitamin D is crucial for most of our daily functions. So if no one has any more questions, I'm just at 31 minutes. I think I did it this week. And thank you for giving me your time. And welcome back next week, Wednesday, for sure. We'll be here. And we'll try to give you guys a heads up beforehand as to what our topics will be. But I'm sticking in the realm of vitamins for now. And we're going to touch on the vitamin Bs next week. So that's another big one, especially if you want to lose weight. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the comments. All right. Thank you and good night. And be safe. Be safe, be COVID safe, please. Thank you and good night. Thank you.